Hey yo, what is up guys, it's DPX, and with the arrival of a brand new Star Wars movie, which is supposed to round out the Skywalker saga, I decided to count down or rank the best theatrically released Star Wars movies. I say theatrically, because I'm not counting, the Star Wars Holiday Special or those Ewok movies. I'm also not going to count that Clone Wars pilot. I don't really count that. But these are the 10 other movies that have been theatrically released, ranked from worst to best. So, top 10 Star Wars movies. Alright, let's get started. But before we do that, you know what to do. Be sure to like this video, subscribe if you're new, turn on notifications, and leave a comment, and you'll be a little subscriber.
I wanted to give to you, in the last part of your notes here, the significance spiritually of the number 10.
Do you really not like sand? If you don't, then Attack of the Clones is the movie for you. However, if you really also don't like slow-paced, poorly written, unlikable, character-filled, politic-filled, empty-on-action, Hayden Christensen-infested Star Wars movies, then you probably won't like Attack of the Clones. Many people don't like the prequels, and while I don't hate them, I can totally see why many people don't like them. That fight between Obi-Wan and Boba Fett was awesome, and most of the final battle where the clones came and saved the Jedis was a pretty cool moment, but the rest of the movie falls flat. Well, when I was older, when I'm younger, I loved this movie. What was wrong with me? So I wasn't alive when this happened, but I'll try to imagine how this was. So you're a Star Wars fan who loves the original trilogy and saw its resurgence with the Dark Horse comics back in the early 90s, late 80s. You see that there is a new Star Wars movie, finally, the first one in over a decade. You go to see it in the year is 1999, and it turns out that you just watched The Phantom Menace. Now, I don't think this movie is too bad. I like the lightsaber fight. I like the characters of Qui-Gon Jinn and Darth Maul, which many people seem to not like. That's about it. Similar to Attack of Clones, Phantom Menace is filled with characters you don't care about or like, poor writing, slow pacing, and a ton of other plot points that were very uninteresting. It's only higher than Attack of the Clones because that damn lightsaber fight. And I wouldn't say it's coarse and rough either.
So I'm going to be giving this flavor 8.5 out of 10 scoops.
One problem with a lot of big movie franchises is that they're so big, they'll get a lot of other movies. And no one really asked for nonetheless. I've heard just about everyone say that about all the post-Lucasfilm acquisition Star Wars movies, and I can't quite agree completely with that, but they might have a point when it comes to Solo. Just want you to know, we are getting into movies that I think are good at the very least. There were many red flags with Solo, though, at the beginning. It had a troubled production, and many people just didn't want to see a Han Solo standalone movie without Harrison Ford. And then it got mixed reviews, so it kind of made it a bit worse. Despite all this, I stayed rather optimistic going into the movie, and it wasn't terrible, but some of the new characters didn't do much. It has pacing problems, not too much, but they are there and noticeable. And Darth Maul only came back because, movie? I could actually find some good in this, though. The cast is great and gives great performances. The absence of Harrison Ford didn't bother me too much, and the movie is enjoyable.
36.
Very close, but that's not it. Let's go to Gary the Retard. What number between 2 and 4?
So I'm sure you know by now how little the prequels were doing for most people. Then came Revenge of the Sith, which had a lot of prequel syndrome, but I think it might have done more good than bad. First, the bad. Still kind of poorly written. You're meant to feel for certain deaths, specifically Padme, but I honestly never cared about said characters, so I felt nothing for them when they died. Oh yeah, and Hayden Christensen is still Anakin Skywalker.
What have I done?
But the good? The pacing isn't much of a problem because of how much is in this movie. There's 5 lightsaber fights, including Obi-Wan versus Anakin, which is my personal favorite lightsaber fight of the whole series. Ewan McGregor, Samuel L. Jackson, Christopher Lee, and Ian McDiarmid all give great performances, but most importantly, I feel we can skip the first 2 completely and start with Revenge of the Sith, because this one is about Darth Vader. Episode 1 and 2 are about Anakin Skywalker. This is about Darth Vader. Is it fantastic? But is it bad? No, it's not too bad either.
Okay, Mrs. Puff, what's my final score?
6.
Woo!
Back in like late 2015, you just couldn't go anywhere without hearing about Star Wars, The Force Awakens. And yeah, there was a lot to be excited for. And there is a reason it became the biggest blockbuster movie like of all time. It was the first theatrical Star Wars movie in almost 10 years. It brought back the original trilogy's characters as well as the cast. It was also connected towards the original trilogy more than the prequels, and J.J. Abrams was directing, and I'd honestly say it was worth the hype. Many of the new characters were established pretty well. The older characters were also used pretty well without overshadowing the new characters. The lightsaber fight between Rey and Kylo Ren honestly doesn't get talked about nearly as much as it should be. And the plot about Luke vanishing was honestly very interesting and makes a lot of sense. 4 years later, and many people have turned on The Force Awakens, as well as Star Wars just becoming one of the most divisive film franchises ever. What side you're on about the status of Star Wars right now is irrelevant at the moment. People turn on this movie, but it's a really good movie.
Oh, chills. Literal chills.
It was number 5. Number 5 is my brother.
Oh my god, I forgot.
Look, when you clicked on this video and you saw that this was all Star Wars movies, it was made very clear that I was going to talk about The Last Jedi. I actually haven't really talked about this on my channel that much, but those of you who know me personally, you know who you are, know that I'll defend this movie any day. It's a very divisive film, to say the least, with notable flaws, but I personally looked past those and enjoyed the movie. You got more on characters like Poe and Finn, and not to mention that scene where Rey and Kylo team up against the guards. Those are the things I liked that aren't used against this movie. Other basic stuff like the pacing's fine, but the death of Snoke is not a big deal, to be honest. Luke wasn't handled poorly at all. They handled him just right, I feel. The complaint about unestablished force powers like Rey and Kylo communicating or flying Leia is honestly invalid, because never once did Obi-Wan ever tell Luke, hey, you know, you can, if you use the Force, you can actually, you know, grab a lightsaber without actually grabbing it. I mostly agree with the complaints about Rose and the casino scene, but even then, they don't necessarily ruin the movie. And the complaint about hyperspace, you know what? I actually completely agree with that one. That made no sense. The thing is, though, I can understand why people hate this. Hate it. And that's honestly why it's not higher, because I understand these complaints. You're not wrong to have that opinion. However, despite what I literally just said, most of the complaints are made bigger than they really are, and they're kind of over-exaggerated. Just my opinion, though. Don't hurt me.
7, 5. Number 4.
One thing that I'm not sure many people were too optimistic about was the thought of Star Wars spin-off movies. However, when Rogue One came out, that all changed. For me, at least. I don't quite remember the reaction to it, but I remember mine. Now, I know Rogue One is a movie that's not as good on its second viewing, but that wasn't the case for me. Say what you want about this movie, but look at Solo. That was an unnecessary spin-off that no one really wanted, and that had a ton of issues leading into it. Rogue One is more of a spin-off I didn't know I wanted, a movie about the Death Star plan, and that sounds very interesting, and Rogue One capitalized on how interesting it sounds. Not to mention, I think it might be worth seeing just for that Darth Vader scene at the end alone. Okay, whether or not you like the prequels, sequels, or spin-offs, if you're a Star Wars fan, you most likely have one of the original trilogy films as your favorite, and it was honestly really tough for all three of these. I guess, and I'm sure you guessed too, third place goes to Return of the Jedi. I don't have much of a problem with the Ewoks like most people do, but I do with the opening scene. That shit was fucking weird. The rest of the movie though is fucking awesome. Right after said scene I didn't like, we get a sick ass scene with the Sarlacc pit, and we get to see a fight with the Ewoks and the Stormtroopers, which I thought was actually really funny. And that fight with Luke and Darth Vader, one of the biggest villains in all of pop culture, getting his comeuppance and realizing he has some good left in him, and betrays the Emperor, who never expected to be betrayed by Darth Vader. I just realized I never mentioned Palpatine in this video until now. This is a satisfying conclusion to one of the best film trilogies of all time.
What kind of pencil do we take again?
Number 2. Take a number 2.
Looks like you took a big number.
You know what? I think we're getting into perfection territory now, because I really think A New Hope is perfect. What a fantastic way to start off a huge franchise, with the world, the characters, the action, and when I say action, I do not mean explosions! I mean the dogfights. That one lightsaber fight. Even the one scene at the cantina. Obi-Wan chopping off the dude's arm. Once Luke loses Obi-Wan, he's in a dogfight and hears Obi-Wan through the Force and helps him win. There's also a scene where Luke looks up to the sky, thinking about his journey. A very powerful scene, and it's said a lot by not saying a lot, if you know what I mean. A New Hope is, simply put, one hell of a way to start one of the biggest blockbuster movie franchises of all time.
I'm Luigi, number 1.
I'm not even gonna try to make it a surprise, because you know now if you broke it down. Empire Strikes Back is one of the greatest movies ever made. It introduces new characters like Lando, Yoda, Emperor Palpatine, and Boba Fett. The last two didn't do much, but we all love them anyways. We got an awesome opening scene on my personal favorite Star Wars planet, Hoth, and introduced the AT-AT in that same scene, which has also become iconic. And also the scene where Luke uses the Force to grab his lightsaber without really grabbing his lightsaber, which I'm sure was an audience applause moment. I wasn't alive when it came out, so I can't really confirm that, but I'm sure it was. Not to mention setting the tone with freezing Han Solo and Carbonite, and that fight between Luke and Darth Vader. Oh yeah, and who can forget?
Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father.
He told me enough. He told me you killed him.
No. I am your father.
So that was my ranking of all the Star Wars movies. This will be soon outdated because the Rise of Skywalker is going to come out soon. I didn't really realize that. I probably should have made this a little earlier, but, you know, in my review for the Rise of Skywalker, I'll say where I place that movie on this ranking. Alright, so that'll be it for this video. Be sure to like this video, comment, subscribe. Do you agree with my list? And if you're seeing this after the Rise of Skywalker came out, you can include that in your list. So, yeah. See you guys.